So today we're going to talk about demystifying workplace accommodation and how to receive the funding. So quite keen to present today's topic because we know it's a struggle to figure out sometimes the right way and when to provide extra support to an employee who may or may not have disclosed what they could benefit in their work environment from an accommodation. And even the word accommodation can lead to some confusion because it's not about providing staff housing. And that terminology can lead us to some confusion. So we're super fortunate to be joined today with Nate Toevs, and he is the marketing manager at Neil Squire, which is a nonprofit organization that has been revolutionizing the lives of Canadians with disabilities for over 38 years and through accessible and assistive technologies. Nate has a longstanding background in retail, wholesale, and business-to-business sales and marketing activities. And today he's going to share a lot of information on a program that can benefit British Columbians called WorkBC's Assistive Technology Services, or ATS for short. Another acronym. The world is full of acronyms. So ATS. Welcome, Nate. Really glad to have you here. Thanks for sharing your time.
Thanks, Lori. Appreciate it. That's what they pay me the medium bucks for, is to share my time. Before I get going, I just want to remind the employers on the call of one thing, because it's about dollars that you can track and dollars that are kind of hard to track. And sometimes we get all worked up about one and not the other, and vice versa. So I'm about to share a program with you that may benefit you and your employees from a funding standpoint of determining what assistive technology they need to be the best they can be at work, and how this program may be able to pay for some or all of it. But I just want to remind you, the one common thing I keep hearing from people is the cost to train new employees and how hard new employees are to find. So if you've determined in your business that a new employee costs $5,000 to train, and well, that's a soft cost and maybe difficult to track. If it costs you $2,000 to accommodate an employee that's already knows the thing and does the thing and is good at the thing, doesn't it, even though those are dollars that are real and come out of your pocket, doesn't it make sense to spend the two, then let the other person go and try and find a new person and not spend, and then spend the $5 training them? Just wanted to leave that thought with you, because the cost to train an employee is a significant barrier, but it's not like it's a line item exactly on a balance sheet, like providing an at-cost accommodation. Thanks, Lori, for the introduction. Neil Squire has been around almost 4 decades. We're in our 3rd iteration of a assistive technology program in BC. It is our superpower. It is what we do every day, is helping people that have a barrier to their activities, specifically employment, and we help provide those assistive technologies, or as Lori had said, it's called an accommodation, or I heard somebody say the other day, a success tool. That's another good way to look at it, because we want our employees to be successful, right? Okay, so this is Neil. Neil's a real guy. This is how we start all our presentations around the province, because Neil was a real guy. He was a resident in Nanaimo. He was attending U of Vic. He was on the basketball team. He was an honor student, and I have had the great pleasure of meeting many people from the Nanaimo area, and he was just a great kid. He was that great kid you went to school with. On his way back to campus, literally on a dark and stormy night, his vehicle hit a patch of black ice, left the road, and tumbled several times, and Neil suffered the most severe spinal cord injury you can, severing at the C1 brainstem level, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down, and of course unable to move his arms or legs. But his paralyzation was so high he could no longer breathe independently or speak. Any muscle you don't use, you lose, and your voice box and larynx are really no different. So you can see that trach device in his throat that's hooked to a hose that's attached to a pump that's actually operating Neil's lungs. The only good news really at the time was Neil's family. His cousin, Bill Cameron, was an engineer, and along with a couple other dedicated professionals, they were committed to helping Neil overcome this barrier and trying to find a way for him to speak. And they created a groundbreaking device which did enable Neil to speak through a computer using his breath. So if you see the tube in his mouth and the monitor and the piece of paper and then that printer, they were using a modified Morse code language. So he would do short puff, long puff, or short sip, long sip in a modified Morse code. And he would sip and puff the letters into words or into sentences. They'd show up on that monitor you'd have played Pong with back in the day, or he could actually get it to print out on that modified teletype machine. And I'm of a vintage that I used to use a teletype machine in the early 80s, sending orders from Grand Prairie to Edmonton that you would type at one end and it would magically type at the other. So it did take them a while to get it all going. What do you think, Jerry? What do you think the first thing Neil said when they got this all going back in 1980? Well, you're muted, so I can't hear you. So there you go.
I said he wanted a beer.
That was the second thing he said. The first thing he said, Jerry, was, Mom, Dad, it's been ages since we chatted. And then you're right. He said, hey, somebody bring me a kokanee, because actually, that's probably not what he said. But you know what the point being is, that it really was revolutionary. Think of where technology was 40 plus years ago. It did make a massive difference in Neil's life, and not just his inability to communicate with Mom and Dad and ask for things, but to communicate with his caregivers, the nurses, the doctors, the physio and occupational therapists. It really did make a massive difference in Neil's care. Fast forward to 1984, the team had expanded. Expo 86 was on the horizon. There was some really cool stuff happening. Again, technology was moving at a rapid pace. And then Neil got pneumonia and suffered kidney failure and died within a week. It was, you know, being a quadriplegic, other than that, he was rather healthy. So it was quite shocking for everybody that was working with him. So just for a moment, let's pretend we're part of that team, and he died yesterday. So, you know, we're pretty sad today. But once we're finished our sad party, we're at a rehab center in Vancouver, and we think, well, we could help that lady over there and that guy over there. And they just wheeled that young kid in with the ski board accident, the skiing accident. We'll be able to work with them. So that committed group of people back in 1984 created the Neil Squire Foundation. Now, that was when we wrote checks. You guys remember writing checks back in the day? So if you had a nonprofit registered charity with the initials NSF, yeah, that probably wasn't a good decision. So we changed our name to the Neil Squire Society. And well, we're still a society and a nonprofit here in 2022. We just brand under the name Neil Squire. We've worked with over 50,000 Canadians, either in employment, skill development with our computer training programs, our Makers Making Change research development innovation program, or in an assistive technology program like this. We're currently operating in 8 Canadian provinces. After the presentation today, I encourage you to go to neilsquire.ca, which is our website. Go to the programs tab, and you'll find a lot of information about how we bring value to persons with disabilities, most specifically surrounding employment. That's where we spend most of our time. Speaking of employment, or speaking of unemployment, there's close to 900,000 people in the province of BC over the age of 15 that identify as having some sort of barrier, whether that be physical, cognitive, mental health, or what have you. That is a chunk of people. That's close to 25% of our workforce over the age of 15. Now, the good news is persons with disabilities in BC have the highest post-secondary completion rate compared to their peers across the country. Sadly, though, if you have a disability in BC, you're still 50% more likely not to have the same employment opportunity as a quote unquote non-disabled person. So that's something we're working on a regular basis. There's lots of myths that hold people back. And it's often employers that they haven't gone down this road, or they're unsure, or they're just too busy, or there's a million other reasons. You know, I heard an employer ask me once, Nate, if I hire that person in the wheelchair, will I have to get special business liability or WorkSafe insurance? No, you don't. If I hire that blind person, same question, will I have to get special liability or WorkSafe coverage? No. If I hire that person with a disability, will it cost me a fortune to accommodate them? Probably not. Sure, there's extreme examples, but in BC, the average of the thing is about $500. But what's important about this, folks, is that what number isn't in there is the cost to effectively assess that individual, to truly understand their barrier, and then having the expertise to know what is the best assistive technology solution. And that's where we play that role. And obviously that number is not included in that $500. And you could argue the cost to do that is anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000. And I think that's where especially smaller businesses get hung up, is that if you don't know what to do, if you don't know where to turn, and it's not your field of expertise, what do people tend to do? Nothing. So here we've got at least an option for some companies and some individuals to get some help. So as Laurie mentioned, the program's called WorkBC Assistive Technology Services. And yes, we do love acronyms in this industry. So I'll be calling it ATS from now on. So in this slide, what we're doing is kind of unpacking some of the policy and reading between the lines a little bit. WorkBC Assistive Technology provides assistive technology or supports, we'll cover that in a bit, to individuals with disabilities. So it's always the individual that applies, okay? Any of you employers on the call here today, this is not a paperwork intensive process for you because you don't apply, your staff does, okay? There's two streams of input for this program. One is people that are applying for employment services and they have a barrier to job search, the training program they might go through at WorkBC employment centers, or the eventual job they secure. So the WorkBC Centre, through a mechanism, refers them to us for that assessment, the recommendation of AT, we procure it, arrange for it to be delivered, installed, and the individual trained if applicable, and then we follow up with that person in 24 weeks. The other group of people is actually a much larger people, and those are people in the workforce. They're employed part-time or full-time, or they're self-employed, mostly working in smaller businesses, although there's a couple exceptions, which I'll be covering in a bit, because as you know, as an employer, you do have a duty to accommodate the needs of your staff within reason, and as long as it doesn't cause you hardship of one type or another. But it's still a pretty high bar when you're a larger company of, if a staff member comes to you, you got to look after them. So that's why I prefaced all this with, geez, if they're a good staff member and they're all trained up, and yeah, if it costs you a little bit of money, that's a lot cheaper than trying to hire somebody else to fill their role. But we'll get onto that in a bit. But it's always the individual that applies with a disability. So what's a disability? In the context of this program, it's any situation that is temporary, permanent, or episodic in nature that causes a physical or cognitive barrier to their activities. So again, job search or training, or the eventual job they secure if they're a WorkBC client. For people that may be in your employ or other people you know in the community, if they have a barrier to their work-related activities caused by a disability, chronic pain, or an old injury, and if there's a tool that's high-tech, low-tech, software, hardware, ergonomics, hearing aids, orthotics, and that kind of stuff, and that'll help minimize or overcome that barrier, that's the kind of stuff that we can help with for this program. Yeah, I've seen that number, Laurie, 30% of an annual wage. If you're using a hiring company, they're often charging you 10 to 30% of their annual wage to go find that staff member for you. So I'm glad you put that in there.
Yeah, and it works out. It's usually 30% of the first year annual wage to train them. So yeah, if you've got someone in your workforce and you can keep them, you're definitely ahead of the game.
Yeah, and the other thing about training that's interesting is if you've got two people and one is a staff member that's been around and they're the trainer, and then they got the trainee, it's not 1+ while they're training, it's 1-, because the person doing the training is probably not doing their full job and they're training somebody else how to do theirs. So you're actually, you're behind the curve for that period of time till that other person gets trained up, and then the person that was training them then has to catch up on all their work. So anyways, work-related assistive technology solutions are based on individual requirements and work situations. It's not cookie cutter. You know, no offense to a 2-week training period program, but the people that do the work for the clients, we have 6 OTs, occupational therapists throughout the province. 5 of them have their masters of OT. Our assistive technology specialists usually come to us with a rehab assistant degree, and then they are constantly staying up to date with the latest and greatest in technology to recommend the best solution for the client. So the people providing the services through this program are the best that they can be in this country. And we provide these services throughout the province, either in person, via outreach, or virtually. Obviously, through the pandemic, all of our services were provided virtually, but quite frankly, it wasn't a big step for us because we've been doing that. Canada's a big place, right? So when we're providing these services to people in Northern BC or Northern Saskatchewan or Northern Ontario or what have you, we've had to learn how to do these sort of assessments using a distance methodology. We've had to learn how to train people using a distance methodology. So when the pandemic hit, we just kind of transitioned really seamlessly to that. Our biggest challenge was getting the thing to the person with supply chains. And if you've ordered a fridge or a piece of electronics or a vehicle lately, you know exactly what I mean as it relates to supply chain. We can't control the thing. We buy the thing from third-party suppliers all over the country, and sometimes it's just not readily available. And sometimes it, you know, if it's like an ergonomic chair and comes out of Eastern Canada, that's a 4 to 6 week delivery time. So from an eligibility standpoint, people that are eligible for employment services support, in other words, to help them get a job, training, or to help with job search, they'll qualify for our program. For people that may be your employees, again, the focus of this program is smaller employees, smaller employers, or employers that might be in a financial situation where providing an accommodation is just not possible at the time for whatever reason. But we're looking to overcome a work-related barrier due to a disability, we've covered that, or functional limitation. Number 1 disability in Canada is chronic pain. It is the most reported disability in Canada. It's the most underreported to employers, and it's an invisible disability that sometimes can create people absolute anguish, and it doesn't just affect their work life, it transitions into their home life as well. So if you've got employees with a chronic pain issue, and if there's a tool that can help them minimize or overcome that, they may be great candidates for this program. I did mention 2 things that fall outside of the duty to accommodate, where it does not matter the size of the employer. One is to and from work. So if you have an employee with a mobility barrier or in a manual wheelchair, and getting to and from the office is one of their biggest barriers to employment, we can add power to that manual chair to assist them in getting from home to transit and transit to work or what have you, or actually help pay to convert their motor vehicle. Due to their disability, they can't use their feet for gas and brake. We can convert that motor vehicle to hand controls for gas and brake, which will help facilitate them driving to and from work. Or maybe they use their vehicle in the day-to-day course of their activities like I do, and to and from work is, or that ability to drive around is impacted due to their disability. The other thing I'm going to touch on later, that again, it doesn't matter the size of the employer, is hearing aids. If you've ever been involved in a hearing aid purchase for yourself or a family member, you know they're $4,000 to $8,000 a pair. There's no coverage within MSP in British Columbia. And even if you've got a strong benefit program, we have found from administrating this program, $250 to $500 a year is the common coverage, but they're $4,000 to $8,000 a year. That is something that can make a huge impact for your employees. And again, very underreported. Always the last person to know they need hearing aids is the person that needs hearing aids. And it can be a real, create a real cognitive decline for somebody if they don't get that addressed in a timely manner. To be eligible, a client must meet the basic WorkBC criteria. So again, people like Laura and Scott and Lori Scott and Lori Coop are the people that will determine eligibility for the clients. For people that might be in the workforce already, like some of your staff or other people you know in the community, they can apply directly online, and we'll determine their eligibility and work with them to try and find out their level of eligibility. And then lastly, students that are in their last year of a secondary or post-secondary education process, they may qualify as well. Again, we've been around 4 decades almost. We know that these programs got to be flexible. We have to provide these employment-related disability supports tailored to the client's individual needs. So again, it's not cookie cutter. They are efficient and effective in the way that we offer these services in a simple and straightforward manner. The application is about a 15 to 20-minute process. It's not full of a bunch of legalese or industry jargon. It is a very straightforward application process. Again, certainly accountable in the way that we assess, develop, and implement these AT services in an expert way. Neil Squire, this is all we do really for a living, is help people overcome barriers. And again, assistive technology being our superpower. So people that deal with us, they are dealing with the best in the business. We are results focused. This is funded by your tax dollars. And we have many metrics that we have to report to ministry to make sure we're reaching the mandates that they set out in the contract. It is accessible wherever you are in the province, and it is really client-centered. It's all about the client. Without the client, we don't have a role to play, and we know how important employment is and how central employment is to all our lives. So it is all about the client. So available supports, Lori, if you could put in the chat askjan.org. Excuse me, askjan.org is the Job Accommodation Network. It's a website in the States that gives you an exhaustive list of all the different accommodations out there. There's like a gazillion. There's hardly anything today, folks, that we can't minimize or overcome with some sort of tool. As I mentioned, high-tech, low-tech software, hardware, ergonomics, hearing aids, visual aids. The program does not cover eyeglasses, but for people that are losing their vision or blind, there's a ton of different solutions out there for them. 70% of us, like all of us right now, are sitting in a desk. So 70% of people work in a desk type job. That's one of the reasons chronic pain is so prevalent in this program. So ergonomic chairs, sit to stand workstations, different keyboard and mice solutions for somebody that's doing a lot of input of data, lighting. Somebody who suffered PTSD, suffering from PTSD, post-concussion or anxiety, lighting can have a key impact on that. Laura, we got to get you some sugar or caffeine or both. I know it. Don't be sorry. It's Friday at 3:30. If I wasn't so excited about Elton John in 4.5 hours, I'd probably be yawning too. I've had a hell of a week, and I just sorry to pick on you there, but
no, I'm really appreciate what you're saying. I'm trying to, so that nobody can see, but
it's all good. It's all good, man. And when I get in that yawning mode like you, I'm the same thing. For about 20 minutes, I'm going to yawn several times, and nothing I can do to stop it.
Laura,
Other things.
I was just going to say, Laura's one of the hardest working employer managers I've met. So the fact that we got her to sit down for an hour on a Friday.
That's the real victory, isn't it?
Yes.
Nice. We can help with restorative supports, canes, crutches, orthotics. I don't know if any of you wear orthotics. I do. I'm blessed that I have coverage at work, 100% coverage. They're now over $700 a set for a basic set of orthotics. If you've got flat feet like I do, or if you've got plantar fasciitis or a variety of ailments, $700 to some people isn't a lot of money. To some people, it might as well be 7,000. And they end up buying crap like Scholl's, Dr. Scholl's for their feet, when really they need a robust solution. If you know anybody that's lost a limb, we can help with the cost of prosthetics. And prosthetics are in the thousands of dollars for somebody that's lost a limb. Somebody that's navigating the WorkBC contract, if they need interpreting and ASL interpreting and captioning services, the WorkBC Centre will arrange that. Again, the hearing aid thing is huge. Who do you know? It's usually people from 50 to 70 that are in that group, although there's you know, lots of other people that might have a hearing challenge, if they've had tinnitus or tinnitus, if they've had vertigo, there's many ways that a hearing aid can be a solution that can help them. Again, 4 to 8 grand a pair, no coverage through MSP. And even if you've got strong benefits, you're likely going to find, if you looked into yours, 250 to 500 in a year is very common. So that still leaves a huge delta. We always mention, yeah.
Nate, I'm just gonna ask a question on that. For individuals who have a benefit plan, is the benefit plan like a first pay, or? is
Bingo,
there-
Lori.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have what's called last resort funder status. So if somebody needed hearing aids, and let's say it's Joe, and Joe's got a spouse, and they both have benefits, we got to collect all those dollars. We do have to look at if they're a family unit, we have to look at their income less expenses. It is a contribution model, but I can tell you from 3.5 years of providing services, in most cases, we're at least able to take some of that burden from people. And if they don't have any financial resources, and if there's no money left at the end of the month, the program's well funded, and the program will pay everything. But yeah, great question. So we do have to collect those benefit dollars if they exist. So I mentioned again, the individual applies. So let's use an example, a small business. Sheila is their employee. Sheila's in a wheelchair, but they work in an old building and they don't have an accessible washroom. Sheila can't work there full time because she can't do her toileting duties there because there's not an accessible washroom. Sheila would apply, and we'd work with her employer, and if there was a third party that owned the building, in a cost sharing arrangement to do that accessible washroom so that Sheila could work full time there. Or we could help with ramp access in an older building, a hearing loop for somebody who's hearing impaired, those buttons that open doors for persons with mobility challenges. But again, it's the individual that applies, and it has to be one of the employees of that workplace that we're providing the solution for. And that's just a small list of the different accessibility things that we can help with. There's also a $2,500 grant available right now through Small Business BC, anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500. But on that one, that's where the business applies, not the individual. Here, it would be the individual that applies. And then I mentioned vehicle and wheelchair mods as well as an option too. This is a picture of our lab in Burnaby, state-of-the-art lab. The only one other in it in the province that we're aware of is at GF Strong Rehab Center in Vancouver. And this is traditionally where we do our assessments, our training of our clients, our trialing of the different solutions with our clients, and the training of our staff. We can split this, excuse me. Oh my goodness, come on. We can split it into 2 distinct areas with that heavy duty accordion room divider. We've got 2 distinct workstations, chock-a-block full of different software solutions. In that lab, we have about 25 or 30 different ergonomic chairs for trialing, about 50 different ergonomic mice and keyboards, again, to try and find that right fit. We do a ton of work with CNIB and low vision or blind clients as it relates to either hardware or software solutions. Let's face it, with so many people working in a digital world today, if you're losing your vision or blind, that's a huge barrier. The good news is there's tons of solutions out there to help people minimize or overcome that. For people with challenges in doing data input or micing or keyboarding, there's tons of different software solutions today that are very robust. There's one called Dragon, Naturally Speaking, that allows you to operate the entire ecosystem of a Windows environment using voice controls. That company was, in the last couple of years, bought by Microsoft. So Windows 11, you're going to see a lot of those built-in capabilities of you be able to use your voice to do more dictation, to use your voice to do more of the things like open up Word or do this or do that in Excel, and just less of this with the hands, because there's a lot of people that really struggle with carpal tunnel or neck, back, shoulder, and those kind of challenges that, again, affects many of their aspects of their work-related activities. Throughout the province in this contract, the WorkBC centers, our center, and now many, many other businesses, public or private, have gone through the accessible Rick Hansen Foundation accessibility certification process. Should you want to have your business go through this, reach out to me. I can connect you with an organization that does this. You have to pay for it, but there may be funding through a variety of different sources. You'd have to talk to them about that. But when we run and operate these programs, folks, we've again, over almost 4 decades, we've ran dozens and dozens of them. We know the importance of it being private, safe, and a comfortable environment. This is not a program that if somebody applies today, maybe in December we'll get back to them. Once we get the paperwork stuff done, and there might be some back and forth to get that done, we're reaching out to people within 1 to 3 business days to schedule that assessment. What we can't control is the thing. You know, if it's an ergonomic chair that's 4 to 6 weeks out of Ontario, we can't really control that. If it's something that's impacted by this supply chain issue, obviously that falls out of our ability to control it. But should we know that time is of the essence, we'll do everything we can do to truncate the time it takes to do the assessment and just get through that. But if we've got to order something that, again, that we can't control the timeline on, that's something we all got to deal with. In our Burnaby office, we have people from 4 different continents. We speak 20 different languages, and we never want a barrier to service, a language barrier to be a barrier to service. This is a really good example of somebody that worked in a large business. Tony works for Starline Windows. You may be familiar with Starline. They're a pretty big window manufacturer in the province. If Tony had a bad back, his company's too big for him to apply to this program to get an ergonomic chair or sit to stand workstation, but not hearing aids. Again, that falls outside of the duty to accommodate. Tony had severe hearing loss in both ears from tinnitus or tinnitus, which is ringing in the ears. It's one of the most common challenges with our ears that's out there. I've heard people describe it to me as, "Oh, Nate, it's not too bad. I just have a little buzzing in my ear." To some people have told me, "Nate, mine is like church bells going off in my head." And it can be very debilitating. It can lead to vertigo and other challenges as well. So again, Tony applied. General manager of Starline probably makes a pretty good dollar. I'm not sure if he was part of a family unit, but if he was, we got to look at him and his spouse's income, less expenses. If they had money left at the end of the month, it's a contribution model. But clearly at the end of the day, he was in the program and a success story, and we were able to take some of that burden from Tony and his family. And as you can see, he says his hearing amplifiers have greatly improved his ability to do all his duties at work, and could not imagine not having them. This is a good example of somebody that has a multiple barriered situation where Karen has cerebral palsy and scoliosis, which is curvature of the spine. So with Karen, with this cerebral palsy, she has tremors or shakiness. And with her scoliosis, she leans a little bit. And then the longer she works, the more she leans, and the more she leans, it creates a chronic pain and a chronic fatigue issue for Karen. So we got her this special chair. This chair was designed for Karen. It's got wings on both sides. You can see that burgundy wing on the side. That helps keep Karen in an upright position. With her cerebral palsy, from time to time, she has a spastic response, which causes her to push back. Sometimes she messes up a bit of her work on the keyboard, but it also pushes her chair back. So that chair can actually lock in place so she doesn't move back when she has that spastic response, and less often she messes up her work. But the other thing that was really cool that we got her was that keyboard, again, has spaced out keys due to her tremors, but we got her a very high-end word prediction software called WordQ, not like autocorrect on our stupid cell phones, way better. And if Karen is doing a document that's like 500 words, she's actually typing less than 100 of the words, and the software is helping her determine what the other words are, and she's just got to do a simple mouse click or a tab. A really great solution for somebody like Karen, somebody with arthritis, somebody that doesn't have good tactile use of their hands or fingers. That kind of word queue saves those kind of people a lot of keyboarding and micing efforts. And then lastly, Melanie, and why we use this example is because all 3 parties were involved financially. Melanie is a specialized employment counselor working with persons with disabilities most days. part of her job is often listening to their story and understanding their challenges and barriers. And sometimes those stories can be, quite frankly, heartbreaking. Melanie's challenge, especially when we moved to Zoom, was she already had poor hearing, and then she was trying to listen to people on the crappy speakers on her desktop or laptop, and she was constantly having to ask people to repeat themselves. So she applied, got approved for Bluetooth enabled hearing aids. Her employer bought her a Bluetooth enabled monitor, so she's not listening to the crappy speaker on the monitor. Whatever's being said online is being fed directly into her hearing aids via Bluetooth. And then Lori purchased the partner mic, because not only would she use it at work when she's back to in person, but she would also use it personally at home or in other activities. And it's exactly what it suggests. It's a microphone that can hang off somebody, hang off their shirt, or it's like a pen that can be put on a string around their neck. And when they speak, again, the microphone picks it up and feeds it directly into Melanie's Bluetooth enabled hearing aids. So if she's out in a loud environment, a loud restaurant environment, again, the communication is a lot better. And her comments, it reduced her overall stress considerably due to the quality and level of adaptability in the hearing aid technology she received. And it allowed her to hear a lot better when dealing with clients. So a really good solution. We have offices throughout the province. I'm currently coming to you today from the condo office. I'm currently at the kitchen table office. I would tell you I'd be in other parts of the office today, but I've been out of the office all day doing other stuff. So, and like I said, right after this, it's Elton John. So I'll be out of the office officially. All right. Okay, so the process to apply is really quite simple. Again, if it's a client, if you've worked at the WorkBC office and you have a staff member that's still in that 52-week of sustainment with them, there's two ways they can do it. The WorkBC office can assist them, or because they're also in the workforce, they could apply directly to us. So they have two options. If they haven't secured their employment yet and their barrier is job search or the training program, the WorkBC Centre is going to refer them to us for that assessment, and then we'll take it from there. If it's somebody you already know, whether it's one of your employees or somebody else in the community that could benefit from this, well, that's a rather long URL. You just go to workbc.ca, click on Employment Services as one of the main tabs. And then the fifth one down is the WorkBC Assistive Technology Services Program. And it's really basic stuff, folks. First thing they have to do is sign up for a BC Services card. It used to be called the BC EID. Now that it's gone to what's called the BC Services card. If they've already got that, they can go to step 2. And really it's, who are you? Where do you live? What do you do for employment or self-employment? What is your barrier or barriers? How does it impact your day-to-day work activities? And then that comes to us. We have to vet that application. Again, there might be some back and forth to confirm some stuff. But once we get somebody to the status of approved, whether they're a WorkBC client or somebody in the workforce already, the process is identical. Assess, generate a report, work with our assistive technology specialist, procure, and then arrange for delivery, setup, and training if applicable, and follow up in 24 weeks. Again, it is a really thorough process. It is not a one and done process. A good example would be somebody with low vision that, last year in 2021, we got them some low vision tools. And then unfortunately, by 2022, they had lost their vision and they need a different set of tools. They would be able to apply again, and we would move from this to that, and that's okay. What we can't do is get somebody the same thing twice. So if Joe works at ABC company and we got him an ergonomic chair, we've told Joe when we got him that ergonomic chair that that's his. We've told his employer it's his. And if Joe goes from ABC company to XYZ company, Joe owns the chair and he can take the chair. Should Joe not take the chair, he can't apply for another chair at XYZ. He's got to go back to ABC and grab that chair. But we told everybody that at the front end when we're going through the services agreement. All right. So a lot of information there, folks. I do know that. 5 million British Columbians. 5 million. There's only one Nate. I can't do this without your help. Folks, the reality is this. Tonight, when you go home, when you drive home in your car, or you watch TV tonight, or you open up a browser or a newspaper, there's a high possibility you're going to see an ad from a provincial government office or a federal government office using your taxpayer dollars to send you a message. You know what I'm saying, right? This program is worth $50 million over 5 years. The marketing budget in it is minuscule. So we can't, our biggest challenge is getting the message out to the peeps. So here's my plea to you. Who do you know that owns a small business? Who do you know that's self-employed? Who do you know that's in HR? Who do you know that has a disability, visible or otherwise? Who do you know that's a practitioner that's frontline to people in pain? Chiro, massage therapist, acupuncturist. Those are great referrals to our webinars. I run this exact webinar every Wednesday from 12:30 to 1 throughout the province. And on the third Thursday of every month from noon to 1, we have a lunch and learn where again, we do the same presentation. And then the last 25 minutes or so is an assistive technology demonstration by one of our assistive technology experts or one of our OTs. So my impassioned plea to you is action this. Tell two people who tell two people. And quite frankly, we've been able to do that because at the end of every fiscal, which for in the world of government, as you may know, is the end of March, sometime in April, I get a report every year, and it's amazing. I get all that, I don't get the names of the people, obviously, but I do get the community that they're from. And I'm always astounded how I don't know about half of these places, which tells me that we've got the message into every nook and cranny through some fashion. So there it is. That's our presentation.